Good morning, everyone. Here we are continuing with the salient characteristics of Paramhansa Yogananda, chapter 17 of Swami Kriyananda's biography. Excuse me. Okay, let's start with a prayer and then we'll go on. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, Beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Beloved Master Paramhansa Yogananda, Saints of all religions, dear friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Help us to feel your living presence within us, to awaken us from the confusion of this world to the clarity of your consciousness, your guidance and your love. Help us to know that we live in this world for one purpose only, to receive your divine awareness and then to share that awareness with all. Om. Peace. Amen. We are moving through 32 characteristics, and I just realized this week and next week is probably the end of this cycle. We'll have to find something new to talk about, but so far, God has always given us what seems to us at least like a pretty good idea. So let's see what happens next. But I get ahead of myself. We are at quality number 27. I've indicated this before, Swami writes, but Master had a strong willpower. I remember a public function when he wanted to blow a conch shell. It seemed he had all but lost the knack for doing so. Instead of giving up with a self-deprecating smile, however, he continued determinedly through several tries until some sort of a sound emerged. I can't say the sound was pure or beautiful, but it was unmistakably the sound of a conch shell. One afternoon, after I'd served lunch for him and a few guests, he had me sit at the table with him for a time. He then tried to flip a fork into his empty glass. Again and again he failed. When he finally succeeded, the fork broke the glass. "But I got it in," Master announced with an impish smile. I think he was teaching me a lesson in perseverance whenever I set my will to anything. The story about the conch shell is fun. It's in the US at least, it's not as common to have a conch shell that you blow, but in India forever, it's been a tradition, the way they're made, and you can cut a little opening at the end, and when you blow into it, it makes this sort of horn-like sound. The Jews use a ram's horn, the shofar. These are all natural instruments created in the natural world that people have adapted over time. They're wonderful. They have wonderful sounds to them. The thing about the conch shell, I'm not good at blowing. When you have to blow it sort of like you blow a trumpet, apparently, which is a making your lips vibrate. The point being, when it doesn't work, it really doesn't work. You get this real, either you just get the sound of your own lips kind of, blubbering through, or else you get this sort of half sound out of the conch shell. It's very, it's very painful to listen to someone try to blow a conch shell and not succeed very well. And when the sound isn't very good, it's recognizably a conch shell, but it's not loud and thrilling. When they're blown well, it's a wonderful sound. It's a clarion call of the spirit. But when it's not blown well, it's not. So the fact that Master persevered in such a situation really shows, above all, his determination, because the middle ground couldn't have been pleasant for anyone. But he'd set his mind to blow it, so he was going to blow it. And then Swami talks about flipping the fork. It's if you have a large-sized dinner fork and the tines are tipped up, you hit the tines like that, and it causes the handle to flip up like this. So it was just like completely purposeless on a certain level. Swami was not invited to sit at the table to watch Master flip the fork. It was common, Swami said, Master would ask him to serve when he had guests for lunch, and then afterwards Master would invite Swami to sit with him, and they would have relaxed time together after the guests had gone and the work was taken care of. So it was one of the times when Master really focused on Swamiji and talked with him and instructed him. So there they are sitting there, and Master's continually flipping this fork for no purpose whatsoever except to get it into the glass, finally getting all the angles right and the pressure right and getting it into the glass. And the big metal fork broke the glass. Master didn't care. He'd done what he set out to do. And if Swami Kriyananda's salient characteristic was certainly his willpower and his perseverance. And it's a profound spiritual principle that when you set your mind to do something, that you need to keep your word. In the affirmations for self-healing, which we use every week in our Sunday service, we have a quality of the week that has an affirmation and a prayer that goes with it. The prayer for, I don't know whether it's truthfulness or perseverance or willpower actually, but the prayer is, my word is my bond, so also is my resolution, which is a very interesting sort of extension of that. Whenever I hear that because I've learned as much as I am able to keep my word. I consider it to be very, very important to keep my word. But my resolution, when I've given my word only to myself, I have tended to feel that I have more wiggle room than when I've given my word to someone else. But it depends on what the power is that we're trying to develop. If we're trying to develop this ability to say, I set my mind to it, I will always finish the task. To break one's word to oneself is actually profoundly undermining of that conviction. It undermines our faith and our ability to do it. It undermines in a subtle way the universe's response to our intentions. Because if consistently we set an intention and then fail to fulfill it, then even as we set the intention, there's a weakness in that resolution because there's all this vibration of the fact that she doesn't really mean it. So Master was showing Swami, especially with such a sort of silly example in a real sense, which is just flipping the fork into the glass. This is what he set out to do, but this is what he set out to do. And we persevere until we do it. Now, we're not talking about being foolish or fanatical or failing to accept reality when reality is put in front of us. But we are talking about an exceedingly important spiritual principle. Just a person asked me a question. They were involved in a very complicated negotiation with other people who were not being honorable. It was a very confused situation, and the person said to me, I'm tired, I just don't want to do it anymore. I said, well, there would be many reasons not to go forward with this anymore, and there were many reasons, but being tired is not necessarily one of them. Because being tired is, well, too bad. If you've set your will to it, if it's dharma, if it's what God is asking you to do, the fact that you're tired is interesting, but not, and there's a word for it in legal circles, dispositive, which is a word I learned from litigation, which means that it disposes of the issue one way or another. You are tired. You may have to make accommodations for that, but that alone is not a sufficient reason to give up. very often the very fact that we're tired, or as Swami used to say, I'm not tired, I'm tired of, is how he would put it. And so, I'm going to take some seclusion, or I'm going to take a holiday because I'm tired of. We may be profoundly tired of, but that doesn't mean that it is in our best interests to stop doing what we're doing. And there's a wonderful strength also that comes from time and time again persevering regardless of how you feel and succeeding in that. I think I've shared with some of you a wonderful help that was given to me by a friend of mine. I have not always had perseverance. I have not always been able to do what I set my mind to do. It was a struggle that I had to go through in my youth of just not being able to muster the willpower. So when I speak of this, I'm not a person who was born this way by any means. There's lots of things. I mean, Swami, I think, was born this way, but I was not. So I've had to learn a lot about perseverance. And I'm also not, the only word I can use is, well, I would say I'm not systematic, but the fact of the matter is I'm quite orderly when I put my mind to it. But my life does not follow a predictable pattern. I probably flatter myself by describing myself as a creative artist type, which means that I have intense concentration when I feel inspired. But the inspiration, it does not always respond to my willpower, so I can be erratic in my patterns. And I've also had the habit of not trusting that I can do it. But then a friend of mine, this is the whole story, we were talking about this difficulty I had, and she just said to me, just like this, it was almost not with annoyance, but with sort of a self-evident comment, "Oh, Asha, somehow or other you always get it done." And it was very interesting to me. I loved that she said that. And I had to stand there for a minute, and I had to realize that, in the last several decades, as opposed to the earlier decades, that somehow or other I always do get it done. Somewhat chaotically, perhaps at the last minute, not as graciously or gracefully as I might have liked, all these different things. But somehow or another, I always get it done. That was an enormous, it lifted my spirits, and it continues to lift my spirits. Because when faced now with a challenging situation, and I don't know how I'm going to do it, I don't know how there's going to be time for it, I don't know if I have the skill or the courage, I say to myself, "Oh, Asha, somehow you always get it done." And that was earned. And think about that, because I can think about it, because I've had to think about it. What security that gives you. Somehow or another, you always get it done. And that is built, oddly enough, that's built in very small ways. I say I'm going to do the dishes. I say to myself, I'm going to do the dishes. Then I say, "Oh, I don't want to." No, actually, you said you were going to do it. My word is my bond, so is my resolution. I'm going to do these dishes. I'm going to finish. And then sometimes I'll say, I'll just do it the opposite. I'm having a late dinner. I'm not going to do the dishes until the morning, so that it's clear that I have not set my intention, and so I'm not going to do it. This is a quality that we should cultivate, and this is the quality of willpower. Swami's putting willpower and perseverance here. Well, willpower could be described in many other ways. What he's really working with here is just using your willpower to continue until it's done, to feel bound by what you decide, and also then to be very conscious and careful about how you set your intention. And so that if you are not confident that you're going to be able to carry it out, you don't actually fail. So Master gave some very interesting advice. My comment about how my friend's confidence in me and her true observation, which I hadn't noticed, has actually given me more capacity to persevere, because it's taken away an element of doubt which was always there. Will I be able to do this? And interestingly, that doubt is doubt of self, but it's also doubt of God. Will God give me the inspiration and the energy needed to do this? Can we do this together? And the more we recognize that it's not just me trying, but it's also me trusting that if my intention is righteous and I do my part, that the divine will meet me halfway and carry me through this. And this, above all, is what I have found to be true. I found to be that when I need the inspiration will be there. And that confidence also allows you to work more intelligently with your own energy. I first found this out when I was writing, which in the projects of, I've now written 4 books, but in the process of writing those books, especially the last one, I really finally got it very clear. If I'm struggling with a paragraph, let's say, and I keep writing it and rewriting it and trying to figure it out, it's finally occurred to me it's because it doesn't belong. And I had actually noticed that before. I noticed that before this book. It doesn't belong. Because if it belongs, it's in the flow. Now, in order to be able to have that kind of sensitivity, I also had to know that I'm not just looking for a way to quit. So once I know I'm going to get it done, I'm not just looking for a way to quit, then I can begin to trust my own intuitions. See, a tremendous amount of skill and success on the spiritual path is know thyself. That's why introspection is such an important part of spiritual life. That if we have an honest and a true understanding of our capabilities, one, we set realistic intentions. We don't say that we're going to, I'm going to start meditating 3 hours a day when the most we've ever meditated is 15 minutes. We don't say, I'm going to develop passive streams of income and be able not to have to work 9 to 5 starting 6 months from now when, we can barely hold a regular job. I mean, we have to be realistic about what the actual next step is for us. The way Swami puts it also is, nature never makes sudden leaps. It's just, nature moves step by step by step. I often have described the process of spiritual growth as from the seed. And the seed, splits open and a sprout starts. And if we're getting a tree, that sprout gradually thickens into a sapling, and then the sapling gets bigger branches, and the trunk begins to thicken. And every huge tree that we see, I live in an area where there's a lot of really well-established trees. Every one of them at one point was a seed, but little by little, step by step, it expanded into this reality. So to say, I'm never going to achieve that really elevated, merely because that elevated goal is not my next step, doesn't mean that I don't have it in me to reach it. Part of what we do is we have to set our intention in relation to our own capabilities, because even God, He's not going to just work outside His own laws. The divine could do a miracle at any point. He could take that apple seed and turn it into a huge apple tree just like that. It's just a field of energy, and it can be manipulated in any way if you have the power to do that. But for most of us who exist on the material plane, in the realm of time, in order for us to generate the energy to create that transformation, we have to do it a step at a time. So the question is not just where we hope to end up. The question is, where are my feet right now, and how long is my stride? And just make the right stride. But when we have confidence, when we gradually develop confidence, and we develop confidence from small victories. Master writes about his own memories of being an infant and talks about the small victories of a child, being able to stand up, being able to walk. And he calls these the natural basis of self-confidence. Just yesterday, a friend, a member of our community, she has a 6-month-old. Is he 6? He was a Christmas baby, so he's not even quite 6 yet. I'm holding my hands at exactly the size he is, which is quite small. And she was outside and on a blanket outside in our beautiful green in the center of our community. And I just walked over to have baby darshan, which is always enjoyable. And he's just beginning to sit up. And in fact, she said even as she'd been sitting there, he seemed to have sort of begun to master the concept of sitting up, which of course for a baby vastly increases the potential of his life experience when he can sit up. And I mentioned this, the natural basis of self-confidence. And she said her baby seemed exceedingly pleased with himself for being able to sit up. I mean, it's a skill we take for granted, but there is a point at which you learn it. You set your mind to it, and that's what you watch babies do. They just try and try and try. When they discover that they can get vertical and then they can walk. I mean, everybody else around them is vertical and is walking. And so they set their mind to it and they try and try and try. The natural basis for self-confidence. The process is the same. The process is the same all the way through. So what I was starting to say, this interesting teaching that Master gave, above all, we want to keep that positive flow of energy within ourselves. We want to focus on dynamic but achievable goals and then persevere till we achieve them. And if we fail to achieve them, don't just think that you're not capable. It may be that you are not yet being realistic about the goal that you set. Because there's two sides of it. To be capable is not just to persevere. To be capable is also to be practical in our idealism, which I know is a concept that I've presented in many places, to be practical in our idealism. This is something Master said to Swamiji, to be able to accept reality and then work with what is to create a more expanded reality, but we have to start with a realistic understanding of what is. So Master said, if we know that a challenge or a test, however you want to call it, is too big for you, run away. You rarely get divine confirmation for one's own inclinations. But what he meant by that was, he didn't mean to be cowardly. He didn't mean to not believe in the divine's capacity to help you. He meant to be practical in our idealism. And it's not wholesome to fail and then develop a self-concept of someone who fails rather than succeeds. Now, of course, we can't always run away. It's not always possible. But if it's possible, if it's an optional situation, and you simply know you can't handle it, I mean, this becomes a very realistic and extremely useful a tool within the kit of our own, of how we actually run our lives. There are many times, once I really understood what this meant, there have been many times in my life when a situation, perhaps involving other people or requiring something from me, that I just know I can't handle it. I know I'm not calm enough. I know that there's too much complicated karma involved here, that the temperament or the personality of someone I have to deal with it's not a skill that I have. I mean, run away doesn't necessarily mean that, I get a one-way ticket to some faraway place. Run away just means that I find another way for it to be handled. I pass the responsibility on to someone else. And, and with just the simple statement that, I'm not able to deal with this. I'm just not able to deal with it. I often say to people, don't worry about writing to me or calling me or asking me for favors or anything like that, because if I can't do it, I'll tell you. And this is what I've learned. And it's part of, I think it's part of what has enabled me to develop confidence, that I will work it out. It's because I can tell what I should set my mind to do. And you learn that from failure. But the idea of oneself as not being able to cope is a very, very, becomes a complex. This is like a distinction between the things that happen. There's the things that happen, the way that we feel, the thoughts that we express. And all of those are just reality. That's just what they are. Given my or your present level of spiritual development, this is the inevitable result. I'm not a God-realized master, and therefore the theoretical potential of me is not the actual potential of me. The theoretical is still there, and it will be achieved, but not yet. I have to fill in where my feet are. The distance from here to there is a stride longer than I can take. Therefore, I have to do a lot of little steps in between in order to do it. But having the confidence in all those little steps is really having the confidence in the ultimate goal, because I recognize that that's how I'm going to get there. And so knowing our limits is also a way of understanding how we can persevere and have success, because this is what I'm going to achieve. And sometimes we trick ourselves. We'll just say that this is what we're going to do and know that when we get to the end of it, we're going to actually do something else. But we take it in little bites. And I can always do that. There's a story in Swami Kriyananda, as we have known him, about this woman whose husband developed ALS, that wasting disease that eventually takes your life. And he was in his midlife, and he was a very strong and very physical man. But karma is what it is. And as he began to degenerate, his wife, a lovely woman with a lot of spiritual energy, she just felt she couldn't do it. And she was there with Swami one day, had the opportunity to speak, and she just basically said, I can't do this. Swami's response is, can you take one step at a time? And she said, yes, I can do that. He said, just do that. And that's basically what she did. She stopped thinking about where this was ultimately going, which was her husband's complete debility, and then soon after that his death, leaving her to raise their children and everything that happened. That she couldn't imagine. But one step, oh yeah, she could do that. So we just set ourselves achievable goals, as Master was showing, whether it's flipping the fork or blowing the conch shell. We set ourselves achievable goals, continually succeed until we begin to know ourselves to be someone who can set a goal and can succeed, and everything in life then becomes very different, very much of what we want it to be. God bless you, my friend.